Hello. So today we're gonna be talking about the ICE detention centers. Um, by the way, my name is Pablo George. So, what is an immigration detention? Well, in order to explain this, I think we should start from the very beginning. So, since 1983, prison corporations have been selling the immigration detention, the idea of it, as a response to migration worldwide to deal with immigrants. Nearly every country in the world has a form of immigration detention. The first immigration detention center or facility in the world was actually Ellis Island in New York Bay. It opened up in January 2nd, 1892. Um, it stayed like this until the Immigration Act of 1924, which changed the way Ellis Island operated. At first, it was an immigrant processing station, and eventually it turned into a detention facility where immigrants would go there because how separated it was. It's surrounded by water. The only way getting there is by boat. um, the United States government would use contracts with both private prisons, corporations, and public jails to basically imprison people in immigration detentions. And this will be covered later on in the presentation. I'll talk about this as well. So, what's the problem with these immigration detention facilities? Well, first of all, immigration jails are really packed, really packed. There's a health risk for women, men, and children. Not only this, but it's causing a division between families. Children are literally losing their parents in the facilities. They're being separated from them. This was covered, this was actually talked about in the presidential debate where Biden confronted Trump about this, where he was like, children are losing their parents, and it's because you're not taking care of it, which I just find revolting, you know? Um, and then also, they also talked about this in the presidential debate, the second one, how inhumane the conditions are in the facilities, how dirty they are. These are big problems, and although this solves the, it doesn't solve, but it temporarily solves the problem of illegal immigrants coming to the United States. Sure, they're being sent back, but it's taking a while for them to be sent back. This is one of the various facilities, one of them. Keep in mind, there's at least 200 of them in the United States alone. And you could see how packed they are, how tight. This is only one part. This is one station. And look, you could see they only have a Gatorade, the box, the rations, how they have the blankets too as well. And this is right now during the coronavirus. You could see because they all have masks, or some of them, not all of them even then. Immigration population. So approximately 50 million people are jailed on a given day in the past year under the authority of the United States Immigration and Custom Enforcement. This is the most foreigners held in immigration detention in the United States history. The most. According to the latest snapshot of ICE prisoner population from early November, nearly 70% of the inmates that are locked up had no prior criminal conviction. That means that 70 are innocent and are being locked up inside these facilities. Some of them are even children, as you know. Although Obama deported 1.18 million during his first 3 years in office, Trump has deported a bit fewer. But why is that so? It's because he's keeping them inside these facilities. Could you take a look into this picture and please try to, well, at least just take a look at it. What do you see? I see the tinfoil blankets as well. I see the ration of food they have, the water bottles, although not a lot. These these are not adults. These are kids being forced to sleep on the floor, being forced to be bored and locked up. Is this really the type of childhood you want? There's a health risk during all this as well. As I said, the supplies for kids, they're getting no food, they're getting no water, they're not getting the hygiene they deserve, no toothbrush, no soap, especially during especially during the coronavirus. There's a sickness in bulk. There's a whole bunch of them crowded up in one space. It's very unsanitary. It's overcrowded, and the coronavirus, flu, any type of disease could spread. Not only this, but they're rejecting medication. Um, there's one story in particular that I wanted to talk about. Her name is Teresa. Teresa, she wrote a detailed letter to the United States Department of Homeland Security and from several immigrant rights organizations. She was 4 months pregnant when she arrived at Yan Centro, port of entry of the United States and Mexico border in 2017, seeking asylum from El Salvador. She was placed on a holding cell for 24 hours where she experienced pain and heavy bleeding. She told the immigration officials multiple times that she was pregnant and bleeding, and her repeated request for medical help was ignored. Next, she was transferred to Otay Mesa Detention Center, where she met with the medical staff, but she was not transferred to the hospital for treatment. Only days later did detention staff confirm that Teresa had a miscarriage. Following her miscarriage, she had several complications, including heavy bleeding, weight loss, and headache. Despite being told that she was given an appointment with the provider outside the detention center, Teresa was not, and she had to pay for medication from the facility commissionary, which were later confiscated. Multiple requests were released from detention of humanitarian reasons for denied, and 4 months after her miscarriage, Teresa was still in detention. 4 months. She was still in pain, and she was still being neglected by the medical staff. Not only, this is just one story out of so many that are in there. We haven't even covered about mental health. Let's admit, all detention centers is basically a separation of family and community. You're ripping them apart and putting them into these facilities. And not only this, but there's not even rumors, there's cases where sexual assaults have happened. According to a complaint filed by a Texas advocacy group, guards are attacking victims in camera blind spots, basically where the camera cannot see. And they're telling them that no one would believe them because there's no evidence, there's no camera, and they're immigrants. Why would they believe them? There's political authorities such as AOC. She compared the ICE detention facilities to concentration camps. That's right, concentration camps. Let's look at it. Obviously, ICE detention facilities have them starving. There's cases where they're not being fed, they're not getting water, they're not getting any supply. There's also kids are being separated from families. They're losing them, and then they don't know where they're going. And then you expect the parents to come back for them. People are dying inside these facilities due to the lack of food or the lack of attention, or like how Teresa didn't get the medical attention she was denied. And, and as we know, they're forced to live in there, locked up in a small room with a ton of people living there, and basically locked up for not even committing a crime, just simply being illegal. Concentration camps, however, are different. Obviously, this happened during the Holocaust, and yes, they were starved, they were separated. Many of them were chosen to be killed, or they were simply overworked. And although we're not forcing people to work in the ICE detention facilities, we're keeping them from their freedom. And again, they're forced to live together in small rooms. So when political authorities compare it to the Holocaust, I'd say it's pretty accurate the way these people are, the immigrants are being treated. Story. So this is an NPR story. Aussie kid was arrested outside of his Los Angeles apartment and taken to an immigration customs enforcement detention center in Adelanto, California. He says that I was handcuffed from feet to waist to arms. I arrived there in chains, kid says. Over 76 days, he says, he was stripped, searched, subject to filthy conditions, denied medications again, and briefly placed into solitary confinement simply because he stood up for what he thought. He said that they shouldn't be treated like animals, and they put him into solitary confinement for this. Over there, it's called Bravo, and he says in Bravo there was nobody watching in there. Kid says you'd see people come out of there with bruises, and I saw them come out. He saw them come out of there with bruises. He saw them himself. Kid filed grievances under the ICE procedures with Geo Group, which ran the facility, but they didn't follow through. They promised during the interview that they would deal with this mistreatment and how it wouldn't happen again, but they never followed through. They simply dismissed his complaint. Here's a video I found in MSNBC.
Children were left without a toothbrush, without a bed. They were left filthy, hungry, tired, and sick, and forced to care for one another instead of being taken care of in a taxpayer-funded facility. And Ali, we should just point out, even for those hardline anti-immigration people,
not right.
It is not. We're not spending money. $750 a day
is what it costs.
Being designated, is what it costs. So clearly it is not getting to them. One of those immigration attorneys was on with Chris Hayes last night, and she said if they reunited these children with their family members who are in the United States, the U.S. government would save $1 billion. So the argument that we need to spend the money on Americans, we're spending the money.
Right.
It's just not being
well,
used.
and we're doing something that, regardless of where you stand on immigration or the border, there's virtually nobody who I think thinks that we should be causing children to suffer this way. Joining us from outside.
Children were left.
So what are the solutions to this problem? I believe that alternative accompaniment programs are the way to go. These are programs run by community groups or nonprofits. Instead of them being detained in these facilities, immigrants should be allowed to remain living with the family in the United States. If there are recent asylum seekers without family, then they should be housed with volunteers or in groups of homes of the same people, like the same immigrants, while the courts process their immigration cases. Why should they be locked up together, risking their health, when they could just be living with their families or in a community house? It just doesn't make sense having them locked up and risking all this. We could also have ICE working in different ways. We could have them checking in with them, letting them live with their parents, letting them live with the family, letting them stay where they were, but simply check up on them. Make sure they're staying in one place until the courts process their immigration case. We can't keep locking people up. The United States has so many people locked up already in incarceration, and we're leading in this. I understand that every country has a type of detention facility, but when your detention facilities are not being kept clean, they're not protecting the children, they're not feeding them, there's so much wrong with the detention facilities that I think that we should stop and follow maybe a different path, like the alternative companion programs. I feel like that would be such a much better option compared to a detention facility, keeping them locked up, letting children not have a proper hygiene, have proper childhood, proper anything. They're not being provided with the materials they deserve. Thank you.